All right, let's talk about something that honestly feels like it writes itself. Because when you really step back and look at what's going on, it's not just political, it's borderline surreal. So here we are, watching Australia's leadership circle the globe, meeting world leaders, shaking hands, holding press conferences, all in pursuit of one thing: fuel. Not renewable energy partnerships, not some futuristic clean tech breakthrough. No, good old-fashioned fossil fuels. The very thing they've spent years criticising, regulating, and in some cases trying to phase out. And you're telling me we're supposed to just ignore the contradiction?
With life-threatening illnesses from the bush to major cities for treatment, but because of crippling fuel prices, it could be forced to ground its entire fleet by May unless emergency funding is secured. Here was their CEO on Sky News this morning.
Honestly, it is heartbreaking working in here at the moment. We've reduced by 40% at this point in time. Every day we have to look at those missions, whose child needs to be brought in for care, what's their treatment, are they immune compromised, working with the hospital to understand really what's happening for those families, because many of them are farmers themselves, so they're affected on a professional level with trying to fuel and put diesel into their machines to run their farms, but now on a personal level to support their children.
And it is heartbreaking. I mean, imagine having to turn away parents who need urgent help for their sick kids, having to try and prioritise which child is sicker than another, who needs surgery versus who has cancer. It's just awful. Now, the charity...
Before we continue, do us a little favour by subscribing to the channel, because over 98% of you watching haven't subscribed. It costs you nothing, not even a penny, to join this channel. Have you subscribed? Thanks so much.
Because that's exactly what this looks like. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, also known as Albo, is out here meeting figures like the Sultan of Brunei, while Treasurer Jim Chalmers is flying into Washington DC to sit down with key international partners. And what's on the agenda? Fuel security, supply chains, energy access, fossil fuels. Let that sink in for a second. This isn't some minor policy tweak or behind-the-scenes adjustment. This is a full-on global effort to secure the exact resource that their own political messaging has painted as the villain for years. And that's where the frustration starts to build, because people aren't blind. They see the disconnect. On one hand, you've got strong rhetoric about cutting emissions, moving away from fossil fuels, and accelerating the transition to renewables. On the other hand, you've got top officials literally flying across continents to ask other countries to keep the fossil fuel pipeline flowing.
People who can support us by making donations, all of which would go directly into fueling the plane, and or government to come on board and support us, to give us that confidence to continue to support families without turning them away, which is our current situation.
Now, look, we are in a cost of living crisis. Times are tough, but if there's anything you can do or you would like to help out, visit www.littlewings.org.au. And as we just heard there, hopefully some government support can be secured ASAP, because, gee, our little Aussies need help right now. All right, let's get into the news of the day. Labor's Begging for Fuel tour has further expanded across the globe. Jim Chalmers jet-setted to Washington, DC this morning for talks with counterparts from key countries that supply fuel to Australia. So we've got Jim over in the US. Albo today was with the Sultan of Brunei, where the pair signed an agreement to strengthen energy supply chains and maintain open trade between the two countries.
And look, let's be real for a moment. No serious person is arguing that fossil fuels can just disappear overnight. That's not how energy systems work. Countries like Australia, and honestly most of the world, are still heavily dependent on oil, gas and coal. That's just the reality. The infrastructure, the economy, the logistics of daily life, it all still leans on these energy sources. So if the government came out and said, hey, we're transitioning, but we still need fossil fuels for now, that would at least be consistent. That would make sense. People can respect honesty, even if they don't fully agree with the pace or direction. But that's not what's happening here. What's happening is a messaging gap, a big one. domestically, fossil fuels are treated like the problem. Internationally, they're treated like the solution. And that split personality is exactly what critics are jumping on, because it creates confusion. And more importantly, it chips away at trust. Because think about it from an everyday perspective. If you're an Australian citizen being told to embrace higher energy costs, adapt to new regulations, and support policies aimed at reducing fossil fuel use, only to then see your leaders travelling the world trying to secure more of those same fuels, you're going to have questions. Fair questions. And that's where the tone shifts from policy debate to something more emotional. People start to feel like they're being asked to carry the burden of a transition that the government itself isn't fully committing to in practice. And whether that perception is entirely fair or not, it matters. Because perception drives public opinion, and public opinion drives political reality.
Now let's zoom out a bit, because this isn't just about Australia. This is part of a broader global tension that's been building for years. Governments everywhere are trying to balance two competing priorities: reducing emissions and maintaining energy security. And when push comes to shove, energy security usually wins. Why? Because without reliable energy, everything else starts to fall apart. Economies slow down, prices spike, public frustration grows, and suddenly long-term climate goals take a back seat to short-term survival. So in that context, what we're seeing from Albanese and Chalmers isn't completely shocking. It's actually predictable. When faced with the risk of fuel shortages or rising costs, they're doing what governments tend to do, looking for immediate solutions, even if it means contradicting.
You've got a government that has built part of its identity around climate action now being seen as begging other countries for fossil fuels. That word, begging, it sticks. It paints a picture of desperation, of dependency, of a country that doesn't have its own energy strategy fully under control. Whether that's entirely fair or a bit exaggerated is up for debate, but politically, it's powerful. And this is where I'll be blunt. You can't have it both ways forever. You can't demonise fossil fuels at home and then quietly rely on them abroad without eventually being called out. At some point, the narrative has to align with reality. Either fossil fuels are still a necessary part of the equation, in which case say that clearly and build a transition plan around it, or they're not, in which case stop chasing them internationally. The middle ground might work in the short term, but it's not sustainable from a credibility standpoint. Because credibility is everything in politics. Once people start to feel like they're being told one thing and shown another, trust erodes. And rebuilding that trust, that's a lot harder than losing it.
Now, to be fair, transitioning an entire energy system is incredibly complex. It's not just about flipping a switch and going green overnight. There are economic, technological and geopolitical factors at play. Countries need stable energy supplies, and right now, fossil fuels still provide that stability. But that's exactly why honesty matters. If the path forward includes a continued reliance on fossil fuels, at least in the medium term, then own it, explain it, bring people into that conversation instead of pretending the contradiction doesn't exist. Because right now, it does exist, and it's loud. So where does this leave us? It leaves us in a moment where actions are speaking louder than words, where international trips and high-level meetings are revealing a reality that domestic messaging hasn't fully acknowledged, and where people are starting to connect the dots in a way that's not
exactly flattering for the government. And honestly, this is one of those situations where you don't even need to spin it. The story is already compelling. The irony is already there. The questions are already being asked. The real question now is how long this balancing act can continue before something gives. Because sooner or later, there's going to be a need for clarity, a need for consistency, a need for leadership that doesn't just sound good in speeches, but holds up under scrutiny, both at home and on the global stage. And until that happens, moments like this are going to keep popping up, fueling debates, sparking criticism, and leaving people wondering what the actual plan is. So, what do you think? Is this smart, strategic leadership navigating a complicated global reality? Or is it exactly what it looks like? A massive contradiction that's finally being exposed? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because this one deserves a real conversation. And if you want more breakdowns like this, real talk, no filters, just straight analysis, make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, and stay tuned.